The evening was warm and busy inside the big restaurant near the city square. The sound of talking, clinking glasses, and laughter filled the air. Waiters moved fast between tables, carrying trays full of food. Among them worked a young woman, named Lena. She wore a plain black uniform and a tired smile, her brown hair tied neatly back. She had been working since morning, yet she moved carefully, trying not to make mistakes. The restaurant was fancy, full of important people who came to show off their money. Lena was used to seeing shiny watches and proud faces, but she never paid much attention. She just focused on doing her job, quietly and politely. She had a calm face, but deep inside she carried a storm. Every night when she went home, she found her sick mother waiting for her in their small apartment. Her mother had been ill for years and medicine was expensive. That was why Lena worked double shifts and saved every coin she could. She never complained. She believed that one day things would get better, even if she didn't know how. In the corner of the restaurant stood an old piano. It had been there for years, though no one ever played it. It was mostly a decoration now, something to make the place look elegant. Every time Lena passed by it, her eyes stayed on the keys for a second longer. It reminded her of another life, the one she once dreamed of. Before her mother got sick, she used to play the piano every day. Music was her world, her language, her freedom. She had won small competitions when she was younger, and her teachers believed she could go far. But life had other plans. When her father died suddenly, she had to leave school and work to support her mother. Her fingers, once used to dancing, across piano keys now served plates and wiped tables. That night, a group of rich men came into the restaurant. They were loud and dressed in expensive suits. One of them was Mr. Grant, a businessman known for his money and arrogance. Everyone in the staff knew him. He liked being the center of attention, and no one dared to cross him. He often spoke down to the workers, calling them the background of success. When he walked in, even the manager straightened up. He was a regular customer who spent big money, so everyone tried to please him. Lena took their table, carrying herself with calm respect. Mr. Grant barely looked at her when he ordered. His voice was sharp, like someone used to being obeyed. As she served them drinks, they laughed loudly, telling jokes about business and power. In between their talk, Mr. Grant noticed the piano in the corner and smirked. "Look at that," he said to his friends. "A piano in a place like this. Probably no one here even knows how to use it." His friends laughed. One of them joked that maybe one of the waiters could try it. Mr. Grant chuckled. "I doubt it. These people only know how to carry trays, not music." Lena heard his words while she was setting down plates. She tried not to react. But one of her co-workers, a young waiter who admired her, spoke without thinking. "Actually, sir," he said nervously, "Lena used to play. She's really good." The whole table turned to look at her. Her heart jumped. Mr. Grant leaned back in his chair and raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" he said in a mocking tone. "A waitress who plays the piano. That's something I'd like to see." The other men laughed, encouraging him. "Come on, let her play something," one of them said. Lena froze. She didn't want to. She hadn't touched a piano in years, and she didn't like being mocked. "I'm sorry, sir," she said softly. "I'm here to serve food, not perform." Mr. Grant smirked. "Oh, don't be shy. It's just for fun. If you really can play, show us." His voice had a mix of challenge and arrogance. The room seemed to go quiet around her. Everyone nearby was now watching, waiting to see what she would do. Her co-worker whispered, "You don't have to if you don't want to." But Lena looked at the piano again. Something inside her told her to try. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was pain. But she didn't want to walk away feeling small. She took a deep breath, wiped her hands on her apron, and slowly walked toward the piano. The room grew quieter as people noticed her. Mr. Grant leaned back, a teasing smile on his face. "This should be interesting," he said loudly. Lena sat down on the small bench. The piano looked older than she remembered. Some of the keys were slightly chipped, but it still had a gentle glow under the soft lights. She placed her fingers on the keys, and for a moment, Everything around her faded. Her heart beat fast. She didn't know what she was going to play, but when her fingers touched the keys, the old feeling came rushing back. The warmth of childhood, the memory of her father's laughter, her mother's voice humming in the kitchen. At first, she played softly, almost too quietly to hear over the clinking glasses. The first few notes were shaky. The men at the table snickered. "Told you," one whispered. "She doesn't even remember how." But then, something changed. The sound grew stronger, fuller. Her hands began to move naturally, like they were remembering an old friend. She closed her eyes and the music started to flow from her heart. It wasn't just a melody. It was her story. Every note carried years of silence, struggle, and love. The music filled the room like sunlight through clouds. People turned to look. The waiters stopped walking. Even the kitchen door stayed still. The laughter disappeared. Mr. Grant's smirk slowly faded as he watched her fingers move with passion and grace. The room was no longer a restaurant. It was a stage, and Lena was the soul at its center. She forgot about everyone watching. She played for her mother, for her father, for the life she lost, and the dream she still carried. The sound rose and fell like waves, gentle, then powerful, then gentle again. When the last note finally faded, silence filled the room. For a moment, no one moved. Then came the sound of clapping. Slow at first, then louder and louder until the whole restaurant was applauding. Some stood up. A few had tears in their eyes. Lena blinked, not sure how to react. She stood, her hands trembling. Mr. Grant looked at her, speechless for the first time that night. His eyes had changed, less proud, more thoughtful. He didn't say anything, just clapped slowly, still staring at her as if trying to understand what had just happened. Lena smiled shyly and gave a small nod. She turned and walked back toward the kitchen, her heart still racing. Her co-workers smiled at her, whispering in excitement. One said, "That was incredible." Another added, "You made the whole place stop." Lena didn't know what to say. She felt light, as if a weight had lifted off her chest. For the first time in years, she had played again. Not for money, not for attention, but for herself. When she returned to the table to clear the plates, the men were quieter now. Mr. Grant looked at her differently. "You played beautifully," he said, his voice softer. She gave a polite nod. "Thank you, sir." Then she continued her work, not wanting to linger. The rest of the evening passed quietly. People whispered about her performance, and even the manager looked proud. As the night ended and the restaurant emptied, Lena wiped down the tables and glanced once more at the piano. She touched its edge gently, almost like saying, "Thank you." When she stepped outside, the cool night air brushed her face. She pulled her thin coat tighter and started walking home. The streets were calm, glowing with streetlights. As she walked, she thought about what happened. She had played again, and for a few minutes she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. She smiled to herself. Maybe music wasn't gone from her life after all. When she reached home, she found her mother awake, sitting by the window. "You're late?" her mother said kindly. "Busy night?" Lena smiled. "Yes, a little," she said softly. She didn't mention the piano. She just made tea and sat beside her mother, watching the lights outside. But inside her heart, the music still played, gentle and warm. She knew that something had shifted that night. What she didn't know was that a few people had recorded her performance on their phones. They were already sharing it online with titles like "Waitress Plays Piano Like a Pro" and "Unexpected Talent in a Restaurant." By the next morning, the video would spread fast and people from around the world would see the quiet young woman whose music had silenced a room. But for now, Lena didn't know any of that. She just sat beside her mother, sipping tea, and whispered to herself, "Maybe it's not too late." That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't sleep. The image of the piano kept returning in her mind. The smooth keys, the way they responded to her touch, the sound that came out, and the feeling it gave her. It was more than music. It was freedom. She realized that she had been carrying a part of herself hidden for too long. Maybe the world had forced her to stop, but her heart never did. The melody she played was still alive inside her. At the same time, in a tall apartment across town, Mr. Grant sat alone in his living room. The laughter from the restaurant had long faded, but his thoughts were restless. He poured himself a drink and stared out at the city lights. The sound of the piano still echoed in his ears. He had mocked her, tried to make her feel small, but instead she had shown something he didn't expect. Real beauty, real emotion. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Shame. He realized that money and power couldn't buy what she had. As the clock ticked past midnight, he made a decision. He didn't know why yet, but he wanted to see her again, and not as a waitress, but as the pianist she truly was. He wanted to make things right. And so, without knowing it, that single night, the night when a rich man's arrogance forced a poor waitress to play, became the night that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning came softly, with sunlight spilling through the small curtains of Lena's apartment. The smell of warm tea filled the room. Her mother was already awake, sitting near the window with a blanket over her legs. She smiled when Lena stepped out of the kitchen holding 2 cups. "You look tired," her mother said gently. "Did you have a busy night?" Lena nodded and smiled. It was a long shift, but it went fine. She didn't tell her mother what had happened with the piano. She wanted to keep that moment private for now, like a secret gift she wasn't ready to share. The day passed quietly. After lunch, Lena left for her next shift. The walk to the restaurant was peaceful, but her heart felt different. Something inside her had changed after last night. She still couldn't forget the sound of the piano, the silence of the people, and the strange look on the face of the rich man who had mocked her. It was as if the memory was replaying over and over in her head, every note echoing softly. She wondered if anyone still remembered it, or if it was already forgotten by morning. When she reached the restaurant, her coworkers greeted her with wide smiles. "Lena," one of them said excitedly, "you're famous now." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" The young waiter who had spoken up for her last night rushed to show her his phone. On the screen was a video, her playing the piano. Someone had recorded it, and the video had been posted online. It already had thousands of views and hundreds of comments. People were calling her the waitress pianist and writing things like, "This touched my heart," and "She plays like an angel." Lena's hands trembled as she held the phone. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Who posted this?" she asked. "No idea," the waiter said, smiling. "But it's everywhere now. Everyone's talking about you." She looked around. Even the manager came out of his office to see what the noise was about. He looked at the phone, then at her. "Well, looks like we've got a celebrity here," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "Just make sure you don't forget your shift times." The staff laughed softly, but Lena could tell he was serious. She promised she wouldn't let it affect her work. All day, customers kept whispering and pointing. Some asked if she was the girl from the video. She smiled politely, though inside she felt shy and nervous. It all felt too fast, too unreal. But deep down, there was also a warm feeling. Not pride, but relief. For the first time in years, she felt seen for who she really was. That evening, when she took a short break, she sat near the piano again. Her fingers brushed against the keys. She didn't play this time. She just sat there, thinking about how everything could change so suddenly. She thought about her father, how he used to say, "Music can open doors that words can't." Maybe he had been right. While she was lost in thought, the restaurant door opened and Mr. Grant walked in. She froze when she saw him. He wasn't with his loud friends this time. He was alone, dressed in a gray suit, his usual confident expression replaced with something quieter. The manager hurried to greet him, but Mr. Grant's eyes were already searching for her. When he spotted her near the piano, he walked straight toward her. The other waiters watched silently, unsure what was going to happen. "Can I have a moment?" he asked. His voice was calm, not mocking like before. Lena nodded carefully. Of course, sir. They stepped to one side, near the window where it was quiet. For a few seconds he said nothing, just looked out at the street. Then he spoke, his tone lower than she expected. I owe you an apology. Lena blinked, not sure she heard right. An apology? He nodded. Yes. Last night I treated you badly. I spoke without thinking and I made you play just to prove a point. But when you started, it was like the whole world stopped. I haven't heard music like that in a long time. He paused. You reminded me of something I'd forgotten. What it means to feel something real. She didn't know what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Thank you, she said softly. But I didn't do anything special. I just played. He shook his head. No, you did more than that. You moved people. You even moved me. He gave a small, awkward smile. That doesn't happen often. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Listen, he said, handing it to her. I own a few hotels and event spaces. Sometimes we hire live performers for special dinners or charity nights. I'd like you to play at one of them. I'll pay you, of course. It's not charity, it's a job. Lena stared at the card. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. You really want me to play? She asked, almost whispering. Yes, he said simply. You belong behind a piano, not behind a tray. For a moment she didn't answer. The offer sounded like a dream, but she was afraid. I haven't performed in years, she said quietly. And I'm not sure I can. He looked at her, kindly. You already did, you just don't realize it yet. Before she could respond, the manager called her name. A new table had arrived. She handed back the card. I appreciate it, but I need to work, she said politely. Mr. Grant looked disappointed but respected her answer. He left the card on the counter and said, Keep it. Think about it. Then he walked out, leaving her staring at the small, white card that suddenly felt very heavy. That night, when she went home, she couldn't stop thinking about it. She showed the card to her mother, who looked at it curiously. Who's this? She asked. Lena told her everything. The piano, the video, the offer. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. You should go for it, she said softly. You have a gift. Maybe it's time the world heard it. But Lena hesitated. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough anymore? Her mother smiled gently. You already proved you are. The only person you need to convince now is yourself. The next day she sat on the edge of her bed for a long time staring at the card. Finally, she made up her mind. She called the number. The voice on the other end was friendly. Mr. Grant asked me to schedule you for next week's charity dinner, the assistant said. We'd love to have you. Over the next few days, Lena practiced whenever she could. The restaurant allowed her to use the piano during quiet hours. Her co-workers often stopped to listen. They were proud of her. The sound of her music filled the restaurant even before it opened. It made everyone's morning a little brighter. The night of the charity event arrived quickly. It was held at a large hall with chandeliers and polished marble floors. Lena wore a simple black dress that her mother had helped her mend. She felt nervous as she entered, clutching her small music sheet. People were already gathering, dressed, in elegant clothes. She saw Mr. Grant greeting guests at the front. When he saw her, he smiled genuinely. You came, he said warmly. I wasn't sure you would. She nodded shyly. I almost didn't, she admitted. But my mother told me to be brave. He guided her to the stage where a grand piano stood waiting. Just play from the heart, he said quietly. That's what you do best. When the lights dimmed and the room went silent, Lena took a deep breath and began to play. At first she was nervous again, but soon the sound of the piano carried her away. The crowd listened in silence. The music was soft but powerful, full of emotion. Her fingers moved with confidence now, flowing like water. Every note seemed to tell a story of pain, love, and hope. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. People stood up, cheering. Some even wiped tears from their eyes. Mr. Grant clapped the loudest, his face glowing with pride. After the performance, guests came up to her, shaking her hand, telling her how much they loved it. A few people even offered her future opportunities. Music schools, small shows, lessons. It all felt unreal. Later, as the event ended, Mr. Grant approached her. "You were wonderful," he said sincerely. "I'm proud of you." Lena smiled softly. "Thank you for giving me the chance," she said. He shook his head. "You earned it." He paused for a moment, then added, "You know, sometimes people like me forget that real talent doesn't wear a suit or come from a fancy background. It can come from anywhere, even from behind a restaurant counter." His words stayed with her long after she went home. When she reached her small apartment, her mother was awake, waiting by the window as always. "How did it go?" she asked eagerly. Lena knelt beside her, took her hands, and said with shining eyes, "It was beautiful, Mama. They listened. They really listened." Her mother's eyes filled with happy tears. "I told you," she whispered. "You just needed one chance." That night, as Lena lay in bed, she thought about how much had changed in such a short time. One night of humiliation had turned into a moment of discovery. One man's arrogance had led her back to her forgotten dream. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she finally felt hope again. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this was just the beginning. While she drifted to sleep across town, Mr. Grant sat in his office replaying a clip of her performance that someone had recorded at the event. He watched the way she played, with emotion, not ego, and felt something unfamiliar, something close to humility. He realized he had learned more from her in 2 nights than from years of business meetings, and for the first time in a long while he smiled. Not the cold smile of a man who won, but the quiet one of a man who understood. Outside, the city lights shimmered like stars, and somewhere in the distance the soft sound of a piano echoed in his mind, a melody that neither of them would ever forget. The next morning felt brighter than usual. Sunlight touched the curtains, and Lena woke up with a calm smile. Her mother was already sitting up, her blanket neatly folded on her lap. "You look happy," her mother said softly. "Was it as beautiful as you hoped?" Lena nodded. "Even more. I was so scared at first, but when I started playing it was like the world disappeared. I forgot about everything, the people, the lights, even the fear." Her mother reached for her hand. "That's because music is who you are. You can't lose it. You just had to remember it." They sat together, quietly drinking tea. Outside, the sounds of the city were slowly waking up. For the first time in years, Lena felt like her life had direction. But she also knew things might not be easy. Fame from a single video could fade quickly, and she didn't want to depend on luck. She wanted to work hard for what she loved. When she reached the restaurant later that day, people greeted her differently. Some smiled warmly, others looked curious. A few whispered and pointed, but this time it didn't feel like gossip. It felt like admiration. Her manager came over, pretending to sound casual. "You're becoming quite the star," he said. "If you ever decide to leave, I hope you'll remember this place." She smiled politely. "Of course, this place gave me my first chance again." During her short break, she sat near the piano again. Her fingers traced the keys slowly, almost lovingly. She could still remember every sound, every feeling from the night before. It felt like something inside her had been set free. She didn't even notice Mr. Grant walking in until his reflection appeared in the shiny surface of the piano. "You're here early," she said quietly without looking up. "I had a meeting nearby," he replied, pulling out a chair. "I thought I'd stop by." He smiled gently. "I hope I'm not disturbing your practice." She shook her head. "Not at all." For a moment, they both stayed silent. Then he said, "You know, after that performance, people keep asking about you. A few journalists even called my office." She looked at him, surprised. "Journalists?" He nodded. "They want to know your story. The waitress who played her way into everyone's hearts. It's quite a headline." She frowned slightly. I don't want to be a headline, I just want to play. He smiled. That's exactly why they love you. You're genuine. He handed her a folder. Inside are a few invitations. Some music schools want to meet you. There's also a small event next month, a local concert for young artists. I thought you might like to join. Lena held the folder carefully, as if it were something fragile. Thank you, she said softly. But why are you doing this? He paused for a moment before answering. Because I was wrong about you, he said simply. I judged you for your uniform, for your job. I thought talent only lived in expensive places. You proved me wrong. Helping you is the least I can do. His words touched her. She could tell he was sincere. You didn't have to, she said. But I'm grateful. He smiled faintly. Maybe I needed to do it, for my own conscience. After he left, Lena opened the folder. Her hands shook slightly as she looked through the papers. Each page felt like a door opening to something she had lost long ago. When her shift ended that night, she took the folder home and showed it to her mother. Her mother's eyes filled with quiet pride. See, she said, you were meant for more than serving tables. Your father would be so proud. In the days that followed, Lena practiced more than ever. She played early in the morning and late at night, sometimes until her fingers ached. The piano in the restaurant became her world. Her coworkers often stopped to listen, and customers started coming not just for food, but to hear her play. The restaurant owner noticed the attention and decided to let her perform every Friday evening. Soon the place became more crowded than ever before. One evening, after one of her performances, a man from a music academy approached her. He introduced himself politely and said, Your playing is full of emotion. We would love to offer you a scholarship to study with us. She almost couldn't believe what she was hearing. Are you serious? She asked. Completely, he replied. Your talent deserves to grow. She ran home that night, breathless with joy. Her mother listened as she shared the news, and tears rolled down her mother's face. This is it, her mother whispered. This is the chance we prayed for. But with new hope came new challenges. The scholarship required long hours of study and practice. She had to reduce her shifts at the restaurant, which meant less money to cover medicine and rent. She hesitated, torn between responsibility and dream. I can't let you struggle, she told her mother. Maybe I should wait a little longer. But her mother shook her head firmly. No, you've given enough. It's time for you to live your dream. I'll manage. And so, with a heavy heart but strong will, Lena began attending the music academy. The first day was overwhelming. The building was huge, filled with talented students who had trained for years. She felt small among them. Some looked at her with curiosity, whispering that she was the viral waitress. But when she sat at the piano, everything else disappeared. The teachers noticed her deep emotional connection to music. One of them said quietly after her first performance, You don't just play notes, you tell stories. Weeks turned into months. Her skill grew, her confidence grew, and even her world grew wider. She met musicians, composers, and students who admired her courage. She learned about music theory, performance, and discipline. Every day she felt a little closer to the dream she once thought impossible. Mr. Grant often checked on her progress. Sometimes he sent messages asking how classes were going. Other times he attended her small academy performances quietly, sitting at the back so she wouldn't notice. He never asked for thanks, and she never forgot what he had done for her. Their bond became one of quiet respect, two people who had started from opposite worlds but somehow found common ground through music. One rainy afternoon, after a long day of practice, she stopped by the restaurant to visit her old coworkers. They welcomed her warmly, asking about her studies and shows. The piano in the corner was still there, a little dusty now. She sat down and played a few gentle notes, just for old time's sake. The sound filled the empty hall, and she smiled. It felt like home. As she was leaving, the manager handed her a small envelope. "This came for you," he said. Inside was a letter from Mr. Grant. It read, "There is a charity gala next month. I want you to be the main performer. It's for children who cannot afford music lessons. I think you'll understand why this matters." Her heart warmed as she read it. She knew exactly why it mattered. She had once been one of those children. Without hesitation, she agreed. The weeks leading up to the event were busy. She practiced day and night, perfecting a piece she had composed herself, a soft, emotional melody that told her story without words. On the night of the gala, the hall was beautifully decorated, filled with people dressed elegantly. But this time, Lena didn't feel nervous. She felt ready. Mr. Grant met her backstage. "I'm glad you came," he said. "You've come a long way since the night we met." She smiled. "That night changed everything," she said quietly. "For both of us," he replied. When she walked onto the stage, the crowd fell silent. She sat at the grand piano, took a deep breath, and began to play. The music was soft at first, then grew stronger, richer. It carried the story of a waitress who had been forced to play, who had been mocked, but who turned pain into beauty. Every note spoke of struggle, love, and forgiveness. As she played, she glanced toward the audience and saw her mother sitting in a wheelchair near the front, smiling proudly. Her eyes shone with tears, but her smile never faded. Mr. Grant sat beside her, watching quietly. When Lena reached the final note, the hall erupted in applause that seemed to shake the room. People stood up, clapping, some even shouting her name. She stood, bowed humbly, and looked at her mother. In that moment, everything she had gone through, the long shifts, the humiliation, the fear, the pain, all felt worth it. After the performance, many guests came forward to congratulate her. Some wanted to offer her new opportunities, but the only thing she cared about was seeing her mother's proud face. "You did it," her mother whispered. "You showed them who you are." Later that night, after everyone left, she and Mr. Grant stood alone near the piano. "You've changed a lot," he said softly. "No," she replied. "I just found the part of me that was lost." He smiled. "And you helped me find something too. Humility." They shared a quiet laugh. The hall was empty now, but the echoes of her music still lingered in the air. As she looked at the piano, she realized it had all started with one moment. One night when she was forced to play. What had begun as mockery had turned into destiny. She touched the keys once more, her fingers moving gently, and whispered, "Thank you." The sound was soft and pure, like a promise. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was clear, and the moonlight fell across the windows. It was the perfect ending to a journey that was only just beginning. And somewhere deep inside her, Lena knew that her story, the story that began with humiliation, would go on to inspire many others who had been forgotten, who had dreams, buried beneath their struggles. Because sometimes all it takes is one moment, one song, one chance, to remind the world that even the quietest souls can create the loudest music. The days after the charity gala felt like a dream to Lena. People talked about her everywhere. Newspapers wrote small pieces about the waitress who moved hearts with her piano. Videos from the gala spread across social media again, showing her calm face, her graceful hands, and the emotional melody that brought the audience to tears. But while the world started to know her, she stayed humble. She still lived in the same small apartment with her mother. She still made tea in the same chipped cups. And every morning, she still opened the curtains and looked at the same street that had seen all her struggles. Her mother was recovering slowly. The medicine was helping, and the doctor had told her that with care she could get better. That gave Lena peace. She wanted to give her mother everything she had missed: comfort, care, and pride. But she also wanted to keep playing, to reach higher, to learn more. One evening, as she returned from the academy, she found a letter slipped under the door. It was from a music foundation in another city. They had heard about her and wanted to sponsor her for a special international competition that brought together young pianists from all over the world. She read the letter 3 times, her hands trembling. It felt too big, too far, too unreal. She placed it in front of her mother. "Can you believe this?" she asked. Her mother smiled slowly. "You deserve it. This is the path you were meant to walk." Lena hesitated. "It's far away. I'll have to leave for weeks. What if something happens to you?" Her mother reached out and took her hand. "Nothing will happen. You go. You've already lost enough time worrying about me. Now it's your turn." That night, Lena lay awake thinking about everything. The idea of standing on a stage in another country scared her, but something inside her whispered that she had to go. It wasn't just about winning. It was about proving to herself that she belonged there, among the greats, not because of fame, but because of her heart. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation. She practiced longer than ever before, her fingers moving until they hurt. The teachers at her academy supported her, giving advice and guidance. Even Mr. Grant came by to listen sometimes. He didn't say much, but his quiet presence always gave her courage. Before she left, he said, "Remember, you don't have to impress anyone, just tell your story through the keys. That's what makes you special." She nodded, holding those words close to her heart. When she arrived in the new city, it was cold and full of lights. The competition hall was grand, with polished floors and tall windows. Participants came from different countries, some confident, some nervous. Everyone had their own story, their own reason for being there. Lena felt small again for a moment, like the waitress in the restaurant who had once been mocked. But then she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had come too far to doubt herself now. The first round began the next day. Each contestant had to play in front of judges and a silent audience. When it was her turn, she walked slowly to the piano, her heart beating fast but steady. She placed her hands on the keys and let her mind drift to memories. Her mother's smile, the dusty piano in the restaurant, the laughter of customers, the night everything changed. Then she began to play. Her piece started gently, like a quiet morning breeze. Then it grew deeper, carrying feelings of loss, hope, and strength. Every note told part of her story, and even though she didn't look up once, she could feel the audience listening closely. When she finished, the room stayed silent for a few seconds before applause filled the air. She stood, bowed slightly, and walked off the stage with tears in her eyes. Later that evening, when the results were announced, her name was among those who had passed to the next round. She called her mother right away. "I made it," she said, her voice trembling with joy. Her mother's voice on the phone was warm and calm. "I knew you would. Just remember to enjoy it." The following days were intense. Each round became harder, the music more challenging. Some contestants grew tense, others discouraged. But Lena stayed steady. She practiced quietly in her small rented room, sometimes late into the night. She wasn't the loudest or the most confident, but she had something no one else did, a soul that played from truth. By the time the final round arrived, the judges already knew her name. They whispered among themselves about the girl who played like she was speaking through the piano. The final performance would be broadcast live. As she waited backstage, she felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. She closed her eyes and whispered a small prayer. When she stepped onto the stage, the lights were bright and warm. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and began to play her final piece. The same melody she had played at the charity gala, but this time it was fuller, richer, with small changes that made it sound like growth itself. Each note rose and fell like a heartbeat. The audience could feel her emotions, the pain of the past, the courage of the present, and the hope for the future. When the final note ended, there was a deep silence, then thunderous applause. Some people stood, others wiped tears. The judges exchanged looks of quiet admiration. That night, when the winner's name was called, it was hers. She stood frozen for a moment, unable to believe it. Then she walked forward, her face lit with pure disbelief and gratitude. She didn't make a long speech. All she said was, "Thank you for listening to my heart." And with that, the applause grew louder. The next morning, articles and videos about her performance were everywhere. Reporters wanted interviews, sponsors wanted deals, and music schools offered her opportunities to study further. But Lena stayed calm. She returned home quietly, carrying her trophy in a small bag as if it were something ordinary. When her mother saw her, she didn't need to ask who won. She just opened her arms and hugged her tightly. Life began to change quickly after that. Invitations came from different cities. She played in concerts, on television, and in small community events. Yet no matter how big the crowd, she never lost the warmth that made her special. She always smiled at the children sitting in front rows, remembering how once she had been one of them, watching others and dreaming. One evening, after a big concert, she sat alone in the empty hall. The lights were dim and only the piano was left on stage. Mr. Grant walked in quietly. "You didn't tell me you'd be performing tonight," he said with a smile. "I wanted to surprise you," she replied. He looked at her for a long moment. "You've come so far, but I have to ask, and are you happy?" She thought for a moment before answering. "I think I'm learning how to be. For a long time I played because I was afraid of losing my chance. Now I play because it feels like breathing. So yes, I think I'm happy." He nodded. "That's all that matters?" They talked for a while about life, success, and the strange way fate works. Before leaving, he said quietly, "Do you remember the first night I forced you to play?" She smiled. "How could I forget? It was the night everything started." He chuckled softly. "I was arrogant back then. I didn't see you as a person, just as entertainment. I hope I've made up for that." She looked at him kindly. "You have. More than you know." After he left, Lena stayed behind, playing one last song for herself. It was soft, calm, full of peace. She thought about all the faces she had met, the laughter, the struggles, the love. She thought about how far she had come from that small restaurant corner. In the months that followed, she used her growing fame to help others. She started teaching free piano lessons to children who couldn't afford them. She visited small schools, inspiring students to believe in their dreams, no matter where they came from. Her story became a message of hope, that talent could bloom anywhere, even in silence, even in pain. Her mother's health grew better with time. She could walk short distances again, and sometimes she even came to Lena's small performances, sitting quietly in the front row. Those were the moments Lena cherished the most, seeing her mother's gentle smile, knowing she had kept her promise to make her proud. One afternoon, while teaching a young boy how to press the keys softly, she noticed his nervous hands and said, "Don't think too much. Let the piano listen to you. Music isn't about perfection. It's about feeling." The boy smiled shyly and tried again, and for a moment, she saw herself in him. The same fear, the same hope. That evening, she walked home slowly through the quiet streets carrying her bag of music sheets. The sun was setting, painting the sky in warm colors. She passed by a restaurant window and caught her reflection. For a second, she imagined her old self inside, the tired waitress wiping tables, dreaming of a life beyond the walls. And she smiled, not with sadness but with gratitude. She knew that everything, the pain, the tears, the humiliation, had led her here. She had turned her wounds into music. She had turned her silence into strength. That night, she sat by the window beside her mother, the city lights flickering outside. "You know," her mother said softly, "your father used to say music is like light. It finds its way through any crack." Lena nodded. He was right. She looked down at her hands, the same hands that once trembled in fear, now steady, strong and full of purpose. "I think," she said slowly, "I've finally found my light." Her mother smiled, closing her eyes peacefully. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the city below. And somewhere deep in that silence, Lena could almost hear the soft echo of a piano, her piano, playing a melody that would never fade. Months had passed since Lena had returned home from the competition, and life had started to move in a new rhythm. Each day brought something different, new letters, invitations, or calls from people who wanted her to perform. But she didn't let fame change her. She still woke up early to make tea for her mother, still practiced in the quiet of her small living room, and still spoke softly to everyone around her. What had changed most was how she saw herself. She no longer saw a waitress with forgotten dreams, but a woman who had learned to believe in her own worth. Her music career started to grow naturally. People loved her not just for her talent, but for her kindness. She always stayed humble, never showing off, never forgetting where she came from. When she played on big stages, she made sure the audience felt her heart, not just her skill. After every performance, people came to her with tears in their eyes, saying how her music made them remember someone, something, or a lost dream. Those moments meant more to her than any trophy. One day, while leaving the academy, she met an older man waiting by the gate. He was from a well-known charity organization that supported poor children who wanted to learn music. He said they were opening a small music center in her city and asked if she would visit. She agreed right away. When she walked into the center for the first time, she saw children sitting on small chairs, holding old instruments with missing keys and broken strings. But their faces were bright, full of hope. One little girl walked up to her shyly and said, "Will you play for us?" Lena smiled and nodded. She sat at the dusty piano and began to play a light, happy tune. The children clapped, laughed, and even danced a little. That day, something changed in her heart. She realized she wanted to help them more than just by visiting. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about those children, their eyes, their excitement, their small dreams. She remembered how she once had a dream too, but had no one to guide her after her father died. She knew what it felt like to want something so badly and to think it was impossible. So the next morning, she decided to open her own small music school, one that would welcome anyone who loved music, no matter if they had money or not. When she shared this idea with her mother, she smiled with pride. "That's beautiful," her mother said softly. "Music gave you a second chance. Now you can give one to others." With the help of some kind people she had met along the way, and with a small donation from Mr. Grant, she rented an old building in the neighborhood. It wasn't fancy. The walls were cracked and the roof needed fixing, but she loved it. She painted the walls herself, bright and cheerful. She bought second-hand instruments and even asked people online to donate unused ones. Within a few weeks, the building was ready. She named it after her mother, who had always believed in her. When the doors opened for the first time, there were only a few students. Some came shyly, others curious, holding their parents' hands. Lena welcomed each of them warmly. She taught them not to fear mistakes, not to chase perfection, but to feel the music in their hearts. Her way of teaching was simple. She told them that music was like a story and every note was a word. Soon, more children started to join. The small rooms that once echoed with emptiness now filled with laughter and music every day. As the months passed, the school grew. Local newspapers wrote about it, calling it a place where dreams find a sound. People from different parts of the city came to visit. Some wanted to learn, while others just wanted to listen. Lena found herself busier than ever, but she was happy. She had never imagined that something she started from love could grow this much. One afternoon, while she was teaching, Mr. Grant visited. He stood quietly near the door, watching her teach the children. When the class ended, he walked over and said, "You've done something beautiful here." She smiled, wiping her hands. "They're the real beauty," she said, looking at the children running around. He nodded slowly. "Do you remember when you first played at the restaurant? I didn't see who you really were back then. I just saw someone ordinary. But now I see what music can do when it comes from the right place." She looked at him thoughtfully. "You gave me a chance when no one else did. You believed in me, when the world only laughed. I think we both learned something that night." He smiled gently. "I learned respect. You taught me that." Over the next few months, they worked together on more charity projects. They organized concerts where the children from her school performed. The first one was small, held in a community hall. The audience was mostly families and neighbors, but the joy in the room was enormous. The children played simple tunes, but they played with pure happiness. Lena watched from the side, her eyes shining. When they finished, everyone stood up and clapped. It was the same feeling she had experienced years ago, when music had turned a moment of mockery into magic. Her mother's health remained fragile, but stable. She often came to the school and sat by the window, watching the children practice. Sometimes she would close her eyes and hum softly, as if remembering the song she once played long ago. Those moments filled Lena's heart with peace. Every evening before locking up, she would sit at the piano and play a tune for her mother. Calm, warm, full of love. One morning, a letter arrived at the school. It was from a famous orchestra abroad, inviting Lena to perform as a guest pianist. It was a huge honor, a sign that her talent was being recognized on the world stage. She was surprised and unsure whether to accept. Leaving again meant time away from her mother and her school. That evening she sat with her mother and told her about it. Her mother listened quietly and said, "You should go. The world needs to hear your music. You've already built something beautiful here. It will wait for you." With her mother's blessing, Lena accepted the invitation. The concert was held in a grand hall in another country, with thousands of people attending. As she walked onto the stage, she felt the same calm she had felt the night she first played in the restaurant. She knew now that every performance was not about proving anything, but about sharing a piece of herself. She began to play, and the hall filled with her sound, gentle, emotional, pure. The audience listened as if under a spell. When the final note faded, there was complete silence, followed by a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. After the concert, journalists surrounded her, asking about her journey. She told them simply, "Music saved me when I had nothing. I just wanted to do the same for others." Her words spread across news channels, touching many hearts. She returned home to find the children at her school waiting with flowers and hand-drawn cards. One small boy said, "You're our hero." She laughed softly and said, "No, you're mine." Her days became full again, teaching, performing, caring for her mother, and managing the growing school. Sometimes she felt tired, but never unhappy. Every challenge reminded her that she was living the life she once thought impossible. She received many offers from big companies and music labels, but she chose only what felt right. Fame never mattered to her. What mattered was meaning, the connection between her and those who listened. One evening after finishing her last class, she sat alone in the quiet school hall. The moonlight fell across the piano keys. She thought about her past, the waitress apron, the laughter, the tears, the fear, the night that changed everything. It all seemed so far away now, yet it was still a part of her. She touched the piano gently and began to play the same melody she had played that first night. But this time it sounded different, calmer, wiser, full of gratitude. As she played, Mr. Grant entered silently. He stood there for a moment, listening, then said, "It's strange how one small moment can change two lives forever." She looked up and smiled. "Yes," she said softly. "One small moment and one song." He nodded. "You turned pain into beauty. That's rare." She looked at him and replied, "I think everyone can. They just need someone to believe in them." When she finished the song, he said goodbye and left quietly. She stayed for a while longer, lost in thought. The city outside was quiet. She closed her eyes and whispered a thank you to life, to music, to everything that had led her here. The next morning, she woke up early to find her mother already sitting by the window, watching the sunrise. "You look happy," her mother said. "I am," Lena replied, "because I finally understand something." Her mother smiled. "What's that?" Lena looked out at the light spreading across the sky and said, "That life is like music. It has high notes and low ones. But when you keep playing with heart, It always becomes a beautiful song. Her mother nodded slowly, her eyes full of quiet pride. The two of them sat there in silence, the morning sun shining softly through the window. And as the city began to wake, the faint sound of children laughing and playing drifted in from the school downstairs. Lena listened, smiling, to herself. It was the sound of new dreams, and small, hopeful, and full of promise. And she knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning of another melody yet to come. Years passed gently, carrying Lena's life into a new chapter. Her music school had grown far beyond what she had imagined in the beginning. The small building that once held a handful of children was now filled with laughter, lessons, and melodies echoing through every wall. More teachers had joined her, all people who believed in her dream of giving music to those who couldn't afford it. The community loved the school. Parents came to watch their children play. Neighbors often stood outside just to listen. It had become a place where hope lived in sound. Lena herself had changed, though in quiet ways. She had grown calmer, wiser, and even more humble. Her fame had never gone to her head. She still took the bus sometimes, still smiled at strangers, and still visited the market near her old apartment to buy vegetables for her mother. Her mother's health had become fragile again, but her spirit was bright as ever. She loved sitting by the window in the school's main room, watching the children practice. The sight of them reminded her of her own daughter years ago, struggling to find courage, sitting alone at a dusty piano. One evening, after finishing her last class, Lena walked outside and found the sky painted in orange and gold. She sat on the school steps watching the sunset, her thoughts soft and full. A group of her students ran past her laughing and chasing each other. One of them, a little boy with messy hair, stopped and asked, "Teacher, will you play for us before we go home?" She smiled. Of course. She followed them inside, sat at the piano, and began to play a light tune full of joy and warmth. The children clapped along, and even her mother, sitting nearby, smiled through tired eyes. When the song ended, Lena looked around and felt something deep, a quiet happiness that came not from applause or fame, but from knowing she had made a difference. That night, after everyone left, she stayed behind in the empty hall. She lit a small candle, sat at the piano, and began to play softly. The music floated through the room, calm and steady. She closed her eyes and remembered everything: the restaurant, the night she was forced to play, the laughter, the silence that followed, the applause that changed everything. It all came back to her, not as pain but as gratitude. Every struggle, every tear had led her here. She had found her place in the world through the very thing that once seemed lost. The next morning, she received a letter in the mail. It was from a famous concert hall abroad, inviting her to perform again, this time as part of a global charity event for children's education. The idea touched her deeply. She decided to accept, not for recognition, but because it matched her heart. She wanted to show the world that music could build bridges, that kindness could be louder than pride. When she told her mother, she smiled and said, "Go, my dear. Play for all those who still believe dreams are impossible." Lena hugged her, gently. "You'll come with me," she said. Her mother shook her head softly. "No, I'll watch you from here. I'm not strong enough for travel anymore, but my heart will be there with you." The day of the concert arrived. The hall was larger than any she had seen before. The audience came from different countries, and cameras lined the aisles. She wore a simple white dress and no jewelry, just as she always did. Before walking onto the stage, she took a deep breath and whispered a quiet prayer. She didn't want to think about fame, about mistakes, or about what people would say. She just wanted to play with truth as she always had. The lights dimmed, the audience hushed, and Lena sat before the grand piano. For a moment, she looked down at her hands, the same hands that had once trembled under pressure, the same hands that had carried her through every trial. She placed them on the keys and began to play. The melody started soft, almost like a whisper, telling the story of a young girl who once hid her dreams behind fear. Slowly, the sound grew deeper, richer, filled with emotion, love, loss, hope, forgiveness. As she played, the hall seemed to disappear. She wasn't performing anymore, she was speaking through sound. Every note carried a piece of her journey. The night she was mocked, the kindness that followed, the lessons she learned, and the faces of all the children she had taught. The audience listened without a sound, completely caught in her world. When she finished, the last note lingered in the air like a heartbeat. Then silence turned into a roar of applause. Some people stood, others wiped tears from their faces. She stood slowly, bowed her head, and smiled gently. "Thank you," she said quietly into the microphone. "Music is not mine alone. It belongs to everyone who has ever felt broken, and everyone who found strength again. I play for all of them." The crowd applauded louder. That night, her performance was shown on television across many countries. People who had never heard of her before felt touched by her simplicity and truth. When she returned home a few days later. She went straight to her school. Her mother was waiting by the window, as always, a warm blanket over her knees. "You played beautifully," she said, her eyes shining. "How do you know?" Lena asked, smiling. "Because I felt it," her mother said. They both laughed softly. Lena sat beside her and rested her head on her shoulder. For a long time they didn't speak. They just sat together, listening to the sound of distant music coming from the classrooms below. As the months passed, her school continued to grow. More children came, and she hired more teachers to help. But she still made time to teach one class herself every week. It reminded her of why she started. She loved watching new students learn, watching them find confidence in themselves. Some of them began performing at small local events, proudly telling people they had learned from her. That always made her smile. One day, a girl named Lena, one of her youngest students, stayed behind after class. She looked nervous and said, "Teacher, I'm scared to play in front of people. What if I make a mistake?" Lena knelt down and smiled. "Then you'll smile and start again. Mistakes are just notes that teach us how to listen better." The girl looked at her, confused but comforted. Lena continued softly, "Do you know how I started? Someone once forced me to play when I didn't want to. I was scared and ashamed. But that moment gave me a new life. Sometimes, what feels like a mistake turns out to be a miracle." The girl nodded slowly and hugged her. That night, after locking the doors, Lena walked home slowly under the soft streetlights. The city felt quiet and peaceful. She passed by the restaurant where everything began. It had changed over the years. New owners, new lights, but the piano was still there in the corner. She stopped outside for a moment, watching through the glass. A young waiter was cleaning tables, and a small group of people were laughing. It looked just like the night that had changed her life. She smiled to herself, whispered a quiet thank you to the memory, and walked on. The next morning, she woke up early and went to her school. She had planned a special surprise for the children, a small concert where they would perform their favorite songs. Parents filled the hall, excited and proud. The children played with all their hearts, and when it was over, the applause was warm and joyful. Lena stepped forward and said, "You all played beautifully. Remember, music is not about being perfect. It's about being honest. When you play from your heart, the world listens." The children clapped and cheered for her. As the years continued, Lena's story spread far and wide. People from other cities came to visit her school, wanting to learn not just music but kindness. Journalists often asked how she managed to stay humble after achieving so much. She always gave the same answer. "Because music reminds me that we are all the same. We all have something to learn, something to share." One evening, as the sun set over the school building, Lena sat beside her mother once more. Her mother's breathing was weak, but her eyes were calm and full of peace. "You've made me so proud," she whispered. "You've made the world better with your music." Lena held her hand gently. "I learned everything from you," she said softly. "You taught me to never stop believing." Her mother smiled faintly and said, "Promise me you'll keep playing no matter what. Tears filled Lena's eyes. I promise. In the days that followed, the world seemed quieter. Lena spent her time teaching and playing softly in the evenings, honoring her mother's wish. Music became her way of remembering, her way of speaking to the past, the pain of loss mixed with gratitude, forming melodies that touched everyone who heard them. One afternoon, years later, she sat in the same hall where it had all begun, her school, now full of students and life. A young reporter asked if she could describe her journey in one word. Lena thought for a long moment, then said softly, "Grace." The reporter asked what she meant. She smiled and said, "Because grace is what turns pain into beauty, and endings into beginnings." That evening, the school held a special anniversary concert. All her students performed, old and new. Lena played the final piece, the same song she had played the night she was first forced to sit at a piano in front of strangers. But now, it sounded different. It was softer, warmer, filled with the memory of every face and every moment that had shaped her life. When she finished, the audience stood clapping and cheering. She looked out at them, children, parents, friends, people she had helped and people who had helped her. And in that moment, she realized something simple but powerful, that her story had never been just about her. It had been about everyone who believed, who tried, who kept going even when life was hard. As the lights dimmed and the applause faded, Lena looked up at the sky through the open window. The stars shone quietly, like little notes in a song. She smiled, placed her hands gently on the piano again and whispered, "For you, Mama." Then she began to play one lesson.